G'day, sports stars. So let's talk about the different types of relationships that we can have in our life. So this is your vocabulary. I just want you to pause the video here, write these down so you've got these words to refer back to as we move through this video, and that way they're front of mind and nothing gets caught behind. So let's have a look at our different types of, or what a relationship is, basically. A relationship is our connection to other people. We can have relationships to things or whatever. We're talking about other people, and it goes two directions, okay? We influence those around us, and they influence who we are. It also influences our well-being, our physical aspects, like your whole life is influenced by relationships. And respectful relationships are what we most want to foster. And they are essentially relationships which are beneficial to both parties. And it's not some transactional nature. It just means that it improves your life, your well-being, by being in a relationship with another person, whether it's friends, family, or actually, let's have a look. So the types of relationships we are going to look at. Now, there are other types of relationships, obviously, but this is where we're going to focus. We have family, friendships, online, and then close, intimate relationships. And all of these types of relationships work to lift our well-being, lift our self-esteem, levels of activity, both physical, social. They provide support and so on. And these are all the ways they benefit us as we move through our days. So then we get to family relationships. These are the relationships we're born into. Well, maybe not just born into, it's also uncles and aunties, foster carers, all sorts, right? Like there's a whole range of familial relationships. And we have, like we see here with the Wheeler family, we have an image of what that looks like, but it's actually a much more diverse thing. So a diverse picture if we look at society as a whole. So positive family relationships provide love and support, right? Like that's the goal. However, they change throughout your life. They progress from like a really dependent sort of relationship. Like, when you're a baby, you couldn't survive on your own. When you're a toddler, you probably still couldn't survive, get run over or something. But by the time you're 10, like, you can probably make a scrappy living on the street. And, if you're lucky and as we go up, right, like we get less and less dependent. So we move from a really dependent relationship to a relationship as we get older where you're supporting those dependent upon you. Like, for example, again, when you're 10, you're dependent on your parents, but when you're 20, not as much. Hopefully, if my kids are watching, no. But when you're like 30, 40, you might have your own family who's dependent upon you. These initially are the most influential relationships in your life, right? But this changes like the influence gets less as you get older. That's what Wayne's means. So the influence gets less as you get older. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And again, their relationships are diverse. So for example, that picture of the nuclear family, which is mum, dad, 2 kids, that's not as common as it used to be. We now have blended families where we have couples coming together where they've had previous families, and now you put those together, you get a blended family. We've got single parent families. We have same-sex families. We have extended families. So that's when you're living with grandparents and uncles and aunties. Also multi-generational is something else that's called. We have foster or carer families. We have couples without children. That's still a family, right? And there's more than that as well. But those are our basic ones we'll stick with. But just know that it's a really diverse set of relationships, family relationships. We have friendship relationships. Now, your positive friendship relationships, they provide love and support, and they typically become the most influential relationships as we age into adulthood. So when you're an adolescent, they become more important, and sometimes they seem as though they're more important than your family relationships. And when you go off to, when you move out of home, your friends become the people you call on a daily basis. So they become more and more important. Friends will have a more significant influence in your adolescence. So that's when it really starts to take over a little bit. And that can actually cause friction in your family relationships. They can influence like lots of aspects. So, the way you dress, your attitude towards responsibility, school, all that sort of stuff, decisions you make, behavior. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. And dating, social events, the way we dress, alcohol, all this sort of stuff, drug use. These decisions often take part in the company of your peers, and they make up your friend relationships. So it's a critical part, right? You want to make sure you're surrounded by good people who you trust and who you can be trusted with. Then we have online relationships. And this is becoming more and more important, right? So we're talking like social media here. When you're on in school lockdown for COVID and whatnot, those are online relationships. So they're becoming more and more important in our lives. And our friendships group, like when I was a kid, it was pretty much the 50 kids in your school year, 100 kids in your school year. Like that's sort of all you knew. But now children know people from like much further away, and they interact really, in some ways positive, in some ways negative, depends on who the people are. So there are a variety of ways to build these online relationships. And it's become a really common way that intimate partners are found now. So there's lots of dating apps. That's what we mean there. It can be easy to develop disrespectful relationships on the internet. And there's lots of reasons for that. But mainly it's because seems to be a sense of disconnection between you and the other person because there's a screen in the way. You're not in the same room, so it seems as though it's less of an issue to sort of act disrespectfully to that other person. And even more so, there are other places where we seem like we're fairly anonymous, right? Comment on like things like Reddit and stuff like that, where you're not using your real name and whatever. That sort of anonymous posting can sometimes lead to bigger consequences. But the consequences are real world consequences. They're not just limited to the computer screen, okay? And I know you know this by now. And then we want to get to close and intimate relationships. So during adolescence, you're going to develop very close relationships with friends and potentially intimate relationships that seem like more than friends. And they are. You may have an intimate relationship with another person where there is physical attraction. That's something that happens, and we'll talk more about this as the units move on. So what individuals want. So if there's two people in a relationship, what person A and person B want from that intimate relationship can vary, and it varies amongst them and the rest of society. Some people may want no relationship. Some may be attracted to people of differing genders or the same genders or a range of genders. You may want a certain level of intimacy. You may want less. And these are things that you need to talk to your partner about. Now, as you get older, those negotiations can become a bit more even-handed. And that's why there are certain laws in place about when physical intimacy is allowed to happen, when children and adults, it's to keep those power dynamics safe. A respectful relationship, however, allows for both people to have an understanding of each other and to feel understood. Consent is always important, and you get to decide what it is that you want from your partner. All right, I hope that made a lot of sense. Got pretty heavy there at the end. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye now.